A Case of Displacement by Iain. Oh no, that feeling again. That head spinning, nothing seems quite as it should be, I can't focus feeling. That was so often a feature of Saturday mornings. Except this morning was a Thursday morning. I dragged myself out of bed and stood up. Big mistake, but once I was up I knew there was nothing for it but to shoulder on and try and get through the moaning. I had a lot of things to do. How did this happen to me? What happened last night? Nothing, as far as I can remember. I went to bed early with a cup of cocoa and a crossword. I was asleep by 10:30. So why did I feel like death now? There was a pain in my face and my eyes hurt. I limped to the bathroom and looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked like a corpse. Oh my god. I had to look again to make sure. I was positive that someone who felt as bad as I did should be looking like a dead body, but I definitely, without question, looked like a corpse. There was foliage around my head, and a small clump of trees, larch and poplar mainly, growing from my nose. There was no getting away from it. It was happening again. I got that stinking feeling in my stomach. The sort of heady hopeless sensation you get when you know that everything is about to get horribly, horribly wrong. I knew what it meant straight away. Of course I did. It meant that you weren't dead after all. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'd loved you, and you'd hurt me. You'd hurt me more than you'd ever know, more than I'd ever thought possible. I wasn't over it even now. 4 years later. I doubted I would ever recover property. 4 years ago. So long already. It had never promised to be one of those simple cases that would bread and batter to others in my procession. Then again, if it had been a simple case, they would have gone to someone else, wouldn't they? I was hooked on you from the start. Glamorous, brilliant, they said, but crazed, out for revenge. Clearly, we had a lot in common. I'd never been on the tail of mad philologists before, but then, who had? Anyway, I was the specialist in the weird cases. It was my jam. It was why they came to me. They gave me the photograph, and it took me just half a second to decide to accept the case. They'd said glamorous. They'd left out beautiful. They hadn't said anything about those eyes, that hair, that lovely, lovely face. I wish I'd never set eyes on that picture. I asked them why they wanted you found, and that's when they came out with it. It wasn't so much you they were interested in. More fool them, I thought, as your work. You'd made off with their new weapon. The displacement beam. The beam had been your life's work. They tried to explain the principle behind it. Typographical displacement, they called it. It was something to do with rearranging the way things are spelled at the subatomic level. I didn't understand, but they said that if I caught up with you, I'd figure it out soon enough. I should be careful, though, they said. I could be placing myself in great answer. I was on your tail within hours. It was easy. You hardly bended in with the background. You were a beautiful but desperate Polish philologist carrying a large ray gun through the city streets. People notice that kind of thing. I could tell straight away that you would be one of the nervous ones. It was the logical concussion to jam to, and besides, the edifice was plain for me to see. Sure, you may have been in your 30s, but you were nothing more than an inexperienced kid, out on your own for the first time. You'd spent your life in that ivory tower lavatory of yours, according to your file, and I had no reason to doubt it. A young idealist, it said, so dedicated, so eager to finish her work, that she rarely went out, and was at ease with others. Nobody likes being on the run, but you really weren't cut out for it. You must have known someone would come after you, that your former employers wouldn't let you get away that easily. That's another reason why you were so nervous. That's why you fired the bream that first time. I guess you saw something that frightened you, and just let it zip. Coming across the devastation, my surmise was that This being the first time the beam had been fired in anger, you hadn't truly appreciated its awesome strength. Even you, its investor, had been taken by surprise by its destructive powder. The wreckage was stewed over a block and a half. The overtuned carb, the broken windows of the ships, the mashed politeman's hut lying on the pavement. It was all a dread giveaway. I followed the trail of dunnage all the way across town. I could tell that you were getting the hang of using the bead, because the drainage was more focused, but you were still nervous, jumpy, firing at anything you thought looked suspicious. It was mostly small-scale damage now, but obvious if you knew what to look for. Scared plaster here, burnt panty work there. I was glad that you had only fried the bean properly. No one had been hurt. Yet, I followed your trailer to Corn Gold's Quick Snacks, the former fat-free snack food factory in Eastwood. I decided it was best to be totally upfront. So, gingerly, I went into the deserted plant and called you by name. Cornelia, I shouted. Ms. Brzezinski. There was no reply. At first, I called you again and said I'm alone and unarmed. I just want to talk. Then I heard your voice for the first time. Stay where you are, you shouted. I've got you covered. I couldn't see you, but I could tell by your voice that you meant business, though you were nervous. I made a move for my ID in my inside jacket pocket, and you let me have it. You fried the beam. A glancing blob struck me on the other arm, sending me spanning. I fell to the flood in a heat. I heard you gasp and say sorry. I was forgiving you, even before I hit the ground. Oh, you poor man, you shouted, and came rushing to my aid. It was the first time I'd ever seen you in person. You were beautiful with your blonde hair and your huge blue eyes. You cradled my head as I lay there, and I tried to speak. Your ewes, I said. They are so pretty. Don't try to talk, you cooed. It's just the effect of the typographical displacement beam. You'll be alright in a minute, you poor lamb. As you said this, you showed me the beamer. It was stripped to your back on a swizzle mechanism. Those evil buzzards will have to kill me to get it back, you said. You stroked my hair. Then you said, so who are you? I still couldn't move properly, so I pointed at my pocket and said I in my jockey packet, in my mallet. ID cord. You understood and took out the wallet and looked at it. So, you said, a private eye, eh? I thought they'd come after me themselves. I never thought they'd get someone else to do their dirty work for them. What did they tell you about me? Philalalalogy, I said. Never mind, you said. I can guess what they said. Let me tell you my side of the story. So that's what you did, sitting there on the floor, cradling my head in your arms, leaning up against the empty vat where all Corn Gold's famous porn cracktail flavoring was once brewed up. There was still a faint, but distinct fishy aroma. I still find the smell of porn strangely erratic. You told me you'd spent the last 7 years working on a way of correcting typographical displacement, and that you had just about perfected it, when you'd accidentally set it to reverse and there had been an incident. 3 lab technicians had been grilled. You were subbing as you told me. You told me about your dream, a world where no one ever had to worry about spilling again, where people were free from the tyranny of orthography, and how you'd first had the idea for the typographical replacement beam, which would ensure that all spellings everywhere in the whole word were always correct. You told me of the years of toil, the late nights, the false hypes and the disappointments, and of your near triumph, less than 3 weeks before. But everything had gone sour after the accident. Your employers, and their evil fiends in the government, had seen the potential of your device, how it could so easily be used as a weapon. How soon your dream had become a nightmare. How soon the end you'd envisaged to orthographic confusion became a desolate vision of the whole word gone to rack and ruins. That's why they had to be stopped, why the beam couldn't be allowed to fill into the wrong hands. Cornelia Brzezinski, a strange name for a strange but beautiful lady. The name was Polish, you said, though your ethnic background was not at all elephant. Indeed, if you had your way, the word would be free forever from all ethnic and other tensions. People would live together in peace and harmony, and if your work in the new field of dynamic topographics could bring that vision even one step closer, then you would not have lived in vain. You owed it to your father, you said. It had been whilst he was dangling you on his knee that he told you he foresaw a day when the word would be flee from typographical contusion, about how he'd been working to achieve that jail even before the family had lent Poland forever in a blaze of pugnacity back in 1695. Your father, though, had been presented from achieving his dread. You told me your sad family histology about the way your father, a pioneer in molecular linguistics, had escaped from behind the ironic certain to begin a new lie in the West, and how he had become scoured when he'd been subjected to harassment from the authorities who'd suspected him of leftish learnings. There had even been accusations that he was a fellow driveler. He endured the taints and incinerations for 16 years, but, in the end, it had all proved too much for him. Driven to despair, he'd committed suicide, hinging himself from the grafters of the garbage roof one wet Saturday afternoon, the day after your 14th birthday. You were snubbing again as you told me of your instant regret that you had been unable to help him in his dankest hour, and how you thought of him every day, how you felt that you had to make a contribution for his shake, that it was your duty to carry one with his walk. Was it at that moment that I fell in love with you, as I glimpsed the deep sadness at the core of your soup, or had I been in love with you from the moment I first saw your tincture? It doesn't really matter. What's important is that, lying there, my heat in your arms, I forgot all about my employers, about my missing to bring you back, and discover the replacement bean. I was on your side now. I strayed with you in the quick snacks factory for 2 weeks as you nursed me back to health, and we concocted our scheme, a scheme that would force your oppressors to leave you alone. That would, if it worked properly, free the whole world from typographical inexactitude, as it originally intended. We spent those 14 days in meticulous planing, and the nights in a groping lobe which we both saw develop and bosom into a fling of genuine beastie. By day you did a lot of tangent practice, sitting 10 cans on top of the walk, frying the bream at them, and watching them fill to the ground. Or, if your arm had been spot on, as it increasingly became, splatter into a billion pieces. Soon we were ready. That final night as you lay in my aims, you looked at me with something very like deviation in your eyes and said, "Mark, I think we are going to make it. I think we are going to achieve great things." That night our love bummed with a new intensity. We were going to set the whole world on fire, and we were going to do it together. Alas, it was not to be. No sooner had we gotten up from our macashaft pullet the next morning, beak-footed on the last of the corn gold's fat-free pretzels we'd found in the plant's upstairs orifice, and stolen one fast, fingering kiss, then things suddenly went very, very wrong. We had packed what we needed into my car. You were getting into the front passenger's seat, the bean still strapped to your back. "Come off," you said. "It's time to grow. You can drive the cart." "What?" I said. "You drive the cart," you said. "It's time to goat." "What are you talking ab?" I said, but there was no need to say any more. I saw it in your face. You had realized, at the same instant as I had, that the beaner had been leaking, and that you had been beamed, that you had gotten more than a full dose from its leaping barrel. It had been waking its mischief on both of us all among, and we both realized in an instinct that our dram of shaving the word from the corrupting effluence of its would-be possessors, your former imploders, was nothing but a follow spam. Suddenly, I saw our loaf, as if for the forced time, through new use. You weren't lively at all, you were breaking mud. To be sure, it was only the bean that had bad you bad. If it hadn't been for the bean you would have been still the loan of my line, but you were now as bad as a batter. You saw it in my farce. You saw that I had soon what I had soon. You let out a howl of languish, and basted me with the bean, leapt into the diver's seep of my core and dove off into the moaning mirth as I full grasping into the drift. You left me there to dry, writing in agony. I read the police reports a month or two later, in hospital, When the doctors thought I was efficiently discovered, you turfed onto the fireway and were diving like an almanac. You kept going fatter and fatter until you'd hit some lollards and the car had exploded in a wall of fame. It was all over the news. Paupers. Mad philologist Butte his evil scheme ends in pole up, they'd said. Of course I'd assumed you were dead. Even though there had been no trace of your body in the burned out wreckage. Even though there had been no shine of the beam. I spent a whale 3 tears trying to get over your death. I never succeeded completely, though I was still getting bitter, granularly, little by little. Until this morning, that is. Until I broke up, got out of bed, and had that fooling again. Then I knew that you were still alive, that there was unfurnished bushiness between us. I knew now that you were going to come looning for me, that you were going to come back in my lift once again. Maybe you wanted to pack up where we'd left off. I didn't know what you wasted. I didn't know what I wasted either, but I was going to have to duel with it. It was going to be a struggle. I didn't know if I was going to be strange enough to cope.